Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be presenting my top 10 favorite Pathfinder 2nd edition books. This was actually the winner of a recent poll that I put up while I was recovering from our entire family basically getting sick. It was an option that I put on there as something I thought was going to be kind of like a long shot, but I was really surprised to see that that was the option that won the poll. So that's what we're going to do here in today's video. So before I get into it, just a couple of things just to be clear here before we start. This list is my own personal preference. It's not meant to be a definitive guide. It's not meant to state that like these are the absolute best top 10 books for Pathfinder 2nd edition. We all have our own opinions, so if your favorite books are either not on the list or lower than you would place them yourself, it's not meant as a personal thing or anything like that. It's personal, but it's my person. It's not personal against anybody else. So if you'd like, and I would absolutely definitely encourage people to do this, let me know what your top 10 or top 5 or even top 3 or even just your top 1, your favorite Pathfinder 2nd edition book is. You can let me know that stuff in the comments, or if you make a video response, let me know and I'll be more than happy to watch it. Another thing is I decided not to include the core rulebook and Bestiary 1 in this video. The main reason is it's just they're so important or so basically crucial to running Pathfinder 2nd edition that I feel like including them on this list would be kind of obvious. So I decided not to include them here. I'm looking more for stuff that expands the Pathfinder 2nd edition product line after those core releases. So the Bestiary 1 and the core rulebook are not going to be on here. So let's just get right into it here, shall we? I'm also not going to be doing comprehensive flip-throughs on any of these books. I've done videos on most of these by now, so I will include the Pathfinder 2nd edition playlist at the end of this video, and for the ones that I haven't done flip-throughs of yet, it's something that I'm hoping to do in the very near future. So I'm just basically going to show the book and kind of give you my opinions. I might open up and flip to a certain couple of things in a few of them, but I'm not going to go super in-depth here. It's just meant to be like a fun little exercise. So let's start with number 10, shall we? And that is going to be the Bestiary III. So I said I wasn't going to include the Bestiary 1, but there is 2 and 3 after that. And the thing that I really like about the Bestiaries after the first one. Now, the first one is a great book. Again, they're all fantastic. Every book that I've seen for Pathfinder 2nd edition has been great. But the first one is kind of your generic monster book. And the ones that come after it typically have some sort of theme. For example, I think the Bestiary 2 had more like a fairy tale kind of theme to it, and the Bestiary 3 has a strong emphasis on folklore creatures, or like creatures based off of urban legends. And there's just some really cool examples here. My absolute favorite creature from this book would have to be actually presented right here on the cover, and that is the Tooth Fairy. I never thought in a million years that a Tooth Fairy would be one of my favorite monsters in fantasy RPGs ever, but they managed to do that with me here. It's just something about the creepy, disgusting artwork that they have for it, the fact that they have a special attack that literally pulls a tooth out of a character's mouth and causes them intense pain, or the fact that if you think one's bad, they actually do come in a swarm. I just absolutely love that. And one of my favorite urban legend-based creatures that is in here, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but it's the Japanese legend of the woman in white that comes up to you with her face covered and asking you if you think she's beautiful, and you're screwed no matter how you answer. But I've always liked that legend, that myth, or whatever you want to call it. So to see it presented here was absolutely awesome, and something that I definitely will find myself including in a future Pathfinder game. So that is why that one is at number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have Absalom, the City of Lost Omens. So this is one of 2, at least at the time that I'm recording this, 300 plus page campaign setting books that Paizo has put out for Pathfinder 2nd edition. The other one being the Mwangi Expanse. And both of these books are fantastic, and it was one of the toughest choices, actually, is which one of those 2 books that I wanted to include in this list, and you're not going to go wrong with either of them, but I was really impressed with the Absalom book because Absalom is a city. It's not a large geographic region like the Malangi Expanse is. And so the fact that they made this 300-page book about the city was really impressive to me to begin with. But what's even better about it is the fact that even though they give you a lot of stuff to sort of take in, it's organized well. You have it organized by district, and it's, really easy to read the entries for each of the individual districts. What my recommendation would be is to find the one that you plan to start the players in, read up on that, and then you can sort of expand out based on like neighboring ones. And it's a little easier to tackle it than picking up a 300-page book and going directly cover to cover. At least that's the way that I like to read these things. It does seem a little overwhelming at first, but they present you with enough information to run a really detailed really fleshed out campaigns set in Absalom, or adventures, or just downtime spent in the city. But they don't go so far as to essentially eliminate your ability to customize and, create your own aspects to the city. So they give you a lot of details, but they don't, do it so overbearingly that you can't make it your own. There's also a lot of like cool adventure ideas sprinkled throughout, some campaign seeds, and just overall, just a really fantastic book. And 300-page book on a single city sounds like a lot, but Absalom is one of the most iconic locations in the Galarian world, the Pathfinder official campaign setting. It's sort of like Baldur's Gate or the City of Greyhawk. It's kind of at that level. So it's great to have a book that goes into a great amount of detail while giving you a lot of ability to customize and make things your own. So fantastic book there. All right, coming in at number 8, we have the Pathfinder Game Mastery Guide. This is one of the earliest books to come out for Pathfinder 2nd Edition after the core rulebook and the Bestiary. And I think maybe Bestiary 2 may have come out before this one. I don't remember the exact order off the top of my head, but this was a pretty early release. And this is an awesome book. It's something that I recommend anyone who wants to seriously run Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I think this is something that you need to have in your collection. But for me, the reason that I put it on this list is just because of the options that they add here. They give you your NPC stats, which is great. So you can have them for easy access. They even have like the card set to sort of tie into it. There are some optional rules and stuff like that thrown in here, but my favorite thing that they have is a subsystem for victory points. And victory points are a way of being able to resolve situations without always devolving into like a combat scenario. So for example, something that I've used victory points for was evacuation sequences. So in the Shackled City Adventure Path, which Paizo actually were the ones that published that, or just a home game that I was running where this group of enemies attacked the city, then there was, essentially tasks that the players had to do to evacuate people safely to the point where, the city would, even if buildings were destroyed, the inhabitants would more or less be okay. And it's so like if they do a certain action, then they get a certain number of victory points, and you have to reach a certain threshold to achieve like certain levels of success. And I really like that as a concept. And there's other things you can use it for as well, like social situations, making an impression on people. Instead of bringing it down to just a single die roll, for example, you could have a sequence where the players just get to role play with NPCs, and certain things that they do over the course of the evening can be used towards earning these victory points. There's also like infiltration points, which is your ability to enter areas and remain stealthy while accomplishing certain tasks. So just a really great book overall, and there's some useful charts and tools for improvising, which is something that cannot be understated how useful that really is. So like creating creature stats, like damage values, DCs. There's just a lot of great stuff in here. So a fantastic book, and absolutely had to be in this list for me. All right, so coming in at number 7, we have the Lost Omens Monsters of Myth book. So one of the reasons that I like this book is very similar to the Bestiary III in that I just love mythological or folkloric type of creatures. And this book is a monster book that has these types of like legendary creatures in there. However, it's more than just a simple collection of stat blocks. This book actually gives you a ton of detailed information about the history of the creatures contained within, some of the lore surrounding them, and even options for designing campaigns around these types of creatures. So you can have examples of what you can do to really get the most out of each of these creatures or entities that are sort of thrown in here. Also, the book has kaiju. It's sort of a way of creating them. It doesn't necessarily give you like stat blocks for them, but it's ways that you can create kaiju. So if you wanted like a discount Godzilla in your game, or a similar in appearance but legally distinct version of like Godzilla or Mothra, stuff like that, then this book actually gives you information on how to do that. So what's not to love about that? So that's why this is at number 7 on my list. Coming in at number 6, we have the latest, at least at the time that I'm recording this video, the latest book for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and that is The Dark Archive. So this is one of the rule expansion books. It's designed differently than the other ones that we've seen so far. It doesn't have like the maroon or burgundy or whatever you want to call it and the blue spines here. It actually has a look that's completely sort of sets it apart. So it's sort of like, again, like a rule subset type of book, but there's some great stuff in here. It introduces 2 new classes in the Psychic and the Thaumaturgist, and I just love the Thaumaturgist because they're essentially a walking repository of knowledge of esoteric lore, which they can use to weaken their foes, which I think is really cool. They also utilize things called implements, and they go beyond simple things like a crystal orb or a wand or a staff. Each of them grant you different abilities, but there are things like mirrors, lanterns. There's just a really cool collection of things that you can sort of do with this class. And honestly, the Thaumaturgist is the class in Pathfinder 2nd Edition that at the time I'm recording this video, I want to play the most. So that has to guarantee that book somewhere on this list. I just think that's really, really cool. The book also introduces cryptids. Not just, as creatures, but there's also, things that can happen if you encounter cryptids in the form of aftermath feats, which require certain conditions, like you have to be affected by a certain special attack, or reduced to 0 or put into a dying state by like an elemental attack kind of thing from a creature, and they can sort of give you these special benefits with their own sort of custom drawbacks. My favorite one has to be the one where you've been affected by petrification. So you still have like sort of the stony texture to your skin, and certain parts of your body have basically turned to stone, although you can still utilize them. For example, it gives you like fist attacks that you can do that count as weapons and not like non-lethal, which is really kind of cool. And as you lose hit points, as you come closer and closer to death, the stoning effect actually spreads throughout your body. And when you're reduced to 0, you can choose, instead of falling into unconsciousness and into a dying state, you can choose to turn to stone instead. Now, this is something that can be really useful. For example, if you were already like wounded 2 and you get knocked unconscious, or wounded 3, which if you get knocked unconscious from that point, you're just dead. So you can choose to turn to stone in place of that, which I think is really, really cool. And then you can be brought back with, spells like Stone to Flesh or other things like that that can restore you. So it's just a really cool concept that I really love here. And with the cryptids themselves, they're essentially templates that you can apply to other creatures. But my favorite one, I think I mentioned this before, but my favorite one is the Rumored Cryptid, which is sort of this nebulous type of creature that has an inherent ability to generate misinformation about it. And the more conflicting bits of information are out there about it, the more powerful the creature kind of gets. and it can even change its shape based off of different interpretations of its appearance. It's just a really cool concept, and the more misinformation, like I said, is out there, the stronger it is. But if people start uncovering the truth about the creature, it actually starts to weaken it. And if all knowledge of the creature is completely lost, so any records of it are completely destroyed and there are no longer any living witnesses, the creature ceases to exist, which is, again, kind of interesting. It's just really cool. I love the cryptid concept overall. You also have primeval cryptids, which are these like larger, more vicious versions of other creatures. You have experimental cryptids, which were basically, partially turned into constructs, just experimented on. And then you have like mutant cryptids as well. There's just some awesome stuff in this book. So it's currently sitting at number 6. I haven't been able to read through it all in its entirety yet, so there's a very good chance that that's going to, its spot is going to increase if I do this video again in, say, like a year's time. All right, so now we have entered the top 5, and coming in at number 5, we have another one of these rules expansion supplemental books, and this is the Pathfinder Secrets of Magic book. I was just really impressed with this book from a presentation standpoint alone. It made it, pretty high on my list to begin with. You have descriptions and explanations of the various schools of magic that are presented almost in the form of like journal entries or textbook entries that, an aspiring mage might have to like sift through and read through for, theory and lore. It's just really well done from that perspective. It introduces the Mages class, which is kind of a hybrid warrior magic user that focuses more on their ability to wield weapons, but they can use magic to augment their abilities. They have spell casting, but it's a bit more limited than other classes. Just seems like an interesting class overall. And then you have the Summoner. So for, Final Fantasy fans out there, if you want to be able to summon some Eidolons, so you've got, the ability to do that in this one. Although it's a singular Eidolon that you can sort of customize, and it grows more powerful as you progress through levels and choose feats to augment it, and you draw whatever magical abilities that you may have as the summoner itself. You draw it from the Eidolon. So just some really cool stuff in here. Another thing that I really like is the alternate systems that are introduced. So you have things like geomancy, you have elemental magic, but then you also have the versatile spellcasting feature that you can choose. And essentially what it is an alternate system for how you get to access your spells. So in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, normally if you're a prepared spellcaster like a wizard or a cleric or a druid, then what you do is you would have, say, 4 first level spell slots. You have to choose which spell goes into each of those individual spell slots. So if you wanted to cast Magic Missile more than once, you would have to dedicate more than one spell slot to it. So with the versatile spellcasting, what you do is you just prepare a certain number of spells, and then you can use your existing spell slots however you wish with the spells that are available to you. It's similar to the way that 5th edition D&D does their spellcasting system. It's kind of meant to sort of mirror that. However, the thing that I like about it is that because it is a more versatile method of being able to access your spells, it does come at the drawback of having fewer spell slots per level to actually utilize. So it's one of those things where you can absolutely do it, but there is a trade-off, which again, I actually really prefer that to have the option to do either or, but the more flexible one does have sort of its own little drawback to doing it versus just, the way that it's currently done with like 5e, or even the way that Pathfinder 2nd Edition has it done by default. So just an excellent book overall, and definitely worth adding to your collection. All right, coming in at number 4, we've got the Lost Omens Ancestry Guide. So just anything that expands player options is going to be good in my books. And this book is absolutely fantastic for that. It's essentially just what it is. It's a collection of ancestries and information for ancestries for your Pathfinder 2nd Edition game. It has like these all new ones that you can have access to. Some are common, uncommon, or rare. And yeah, it's just, again, just new options. If you wanted to play like a hybrid, living like a human vampire hybrid. Like, for example, if Symphony of the Night is one of your favorite video games, you want to play a character similar to Alucard, then you can do that with the Downfear. You've got your lizard folk, which is great, orcs, hobgoblins, but my favorite creatures introduced in here have to be the leshies. Leshies are the sentient plant-based humanoids, and they're so many different kinds based off of different types of plant matter. So you could have this one here as like a cactus one. You have one based off of leaves. You have one based off of like, fruit-bearing, plants. You also have the gourd leshy, which I don't think is in this book, but it is in another one. And the gourd leshy is just so cool that it's one of my favorite new ancestries for Pathfinder 2nd edition. So this book, like I said, ranks high on the list for that. All right, top 3 now. So coming in at number 3, we have the Advanced Player's Guide. So, like I said, anything that gives the players more options is going to rank highly in my opinion, and this book is filled with that. It has a slew of things like archetypes that you can play for sort of like a multi-class kind of experience, but there's also a whole bunch of new classes introduced in here, like the Swashbuckler, like the Investigator, and then they have the Oracle. Now, the Oracle is one of my favorite classes, not necessarily that I'd want to play, but just from the experience of having played in a game that was being run over on Master of the Games channel before. Unfortunately, real-world schedules and other things kind of got in the way, and the game kind of fell by the wayside. Unfortunately, only a couple sessions before it probably would have ended, which kind of sucked. But one of my favorite experiences with that had to be with the Balthazar character, who was this undead oracle, who would have like just body parts kind of randomly slough off, and it was just such a well played character. Like, everybody in that group was awesome, except for me, but everybody in that group was awesome, and they had such great characters. But the one that really stood out to me was the Oracle character, and that's in this book. So a lot of great stuff in here. Really fantastic expansions for player characters, new feats, new abilities for certain classes. It's just absolutely great to have, and yeah, one of my all-time favorites. It's the only book for Pathfinder 2nd edition that I actually bought the special collector's edition for. So there you go. I guess that should say something about it. So coming in at number 2, this might surprise some people, may not, but coming in at number 2, we've got the Pathfinder Lost Omens, Gods and Magic. This was a book that I was absolutely floored by when I first opened it up and started flipping through it, and came to the realization that this is what I've always wanted out of deity-based role-playing books. I have all kinds of books like Deities and Demigods for 3rd edition, Powers and Pantheons, stuff like that. And they all tend to focus very heavily on just giving you stats for the gods. Like, it treats it more like an ultra high level monster book than what I personally want, which is lore. And I'm a sucker for flavor text and world building, and this book does that better than just about any other one that I've come across, especially for the subject matter of deities. Like, they really easily could have taken the easy way out and just have like the stats for the god, or like a couple of paragraphs about the religion or the deity itself, maybe some of its history, but they actually just really dive into like the lore behind it, the history of the deity, the way that the religion's practiced. Like, it's all world building and flavor text, and I can't overstate enough how important that is to me personally. It's great to have new classes, new options, new equipment, new monsters. It's great to have all that stuff. And, like, don't get me wrong. In fact, there's been several books in this list that are, on the list specifically for that reason. But something that I really value in these role-playing books is just how fun they are to read. And this book was really fun to sit down and start reading through. It's like it just adds so much to your campaign world. Several of the religions will even have several expressions that you can use for worshippers of that religion that they may use in casual conversation. Things that may not necessarily mean anything to the players in the group, but it's something that just, again, adds that little bit of realism. So for that reason, like just as impressed as I was by that, I knew that this was going to be one of my all-time favorite, not just Pathfinder 2nd Edition role-playing books, but just one of my favorite RPG books in my collection, period. This does exactly what I've wanted other god-based books to do in RPGs, and very few of them have ever really attempted to dedicate themselves purely to world building and flavor, and not just like here's the god stats so you can eventually try to go and fight it. So like that alone secured it a top place on this list. So that is my number 2. And I just realized how that sounded. That was my number 2 selection for my top 10 favorite Pathfinder 2nd Edition books, not the other thing. All right, so coming in at number 1 on this list, and for some of the same reasons as Gods in Magic, this is the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Book of the Dead. Undead are some of my all-time favorite creatures, and I found that books dedicated to undead creatures have kind of been hit or miss based off of what I look for in my role-playing game books, my RPG books. A while back, I did a video about the 3.5 book Libris Mortis, the Book of the Undead, and how I was really kind of let down by that one. This book is everything that book should have been. There's just a lot of great lore surrounding undead and different types of undead, but there's just also a ton of great options included in here as well. There's options for, characters fighting against undead, and there's options for players that, if they, so choose, can become undead. You have like the skeleton ancestry, which is one of my all-time favorites for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because I just love the idea of playing a character that you really like, and if the character dies, you can literally just bring it back as a skeleton. And somebody actually pointed out in my Book of the Dead video, like the skeleton ancestry being a sentient, free-willed skeleton and not just a mindless, undead, like animated monster. They kind of reminded me of the D&D cartoon series from the 80s, which had an episode that revolved around the skeleton warrior who was free-willed and sentient and aware. So yeah, even just to recreate that episode, I think would be really, really cool. But there's just some other great stuff in this book as well. Like I said, one of my favorite things is just the attention to detail in the presentation of the book alone. Like I said, there's tons of like player character stuff. There's tons of like new monsters to add. But in a recent video, I had shown that the border around the pages, and I'm not taking credit for discovering this, other people posted it online, and I'm just, reiterating. But the border around the pages actually becomes more and more decrepit as you progress through the book. So things like the statue here forming cracks through it, the candles burning down, the brazier sort of burning down. Like you see, the smoke is coming way up here, and then it's a bit lower, and then eventually it's almost completely burnt out, and then finally the statue, the drapes sort of festooned along the top of the page here, they become more and more tattered, and then by the end of the book, you just have like these skeletal remains here. So let's just see, like you got that, you've got like the brazier's completely burnt out, the candles are gone, everything's rotted away. Just such a cool attention to detail in a book that was already fantastic just from being able to, read through it and have like the lore, the information, the options, all that stuff that's in there, just top notch. My favorite book centered around undead, period. I don't have a ton of them, but it is my favorite one that I currently have. So that was my list. That was my top 10 list of favorite Pathfinder 2nd Edition books. Like I said, though, doesn't matter which books you choose, you're not going to go wrong. They're all written with a fantastic attention to detail, some really inventive ideas, some excellent flavor text. It's just overall, Pathfinder 2nd Edition has had some of my favorite RPG supplements, period. Not just for a singular RPG, but just in general with how well done and how well presented that they are. So it doesn't matter if you're, which books that I excluded, they're all really, really worth your time and absolutely fantastic products. So let me know in the comments below, what are your favorite books for Pathfinder 2nd Edition? What's your top 10? What's your, or top 5 or top 3, or even what's just your singular favorite book for the Pathfinder 2nd Edition library? Let me know that in the comments below. So I just want to thank everyone who took time out of their day to watch this video. I really do appreciate it. I love making these types of videos. They're fun, they're easy, but it's something that I actually found myself spending a few days longer thinking about this than I thought I would have, trying to arrive at the 10 that I selected. So great stuff there. I also do plan on doing a Pathfinder Lost Omens buyer's guide video coming out in the very near future. At the time I'm recording this, there is another Lost Omens book that's going to be releasing in a couple of weeks. But usually when I get stuff sent out to me, it tends to be close to release date, and then it can take 2 to 3 weeks for it to arrive at my doorstep. So I don't think I'm going to wait for that book to come out. It's something like, that's the kind of thing that you can always update, as the years go on, especially with the amount of support that the product line is getting. I also think I might do a players-based and a game masters-based buyer's guide video as well. So that's something I'm looking forward to working on, because I just, in general, I love Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I want to dedicate more time to it on this channel. So that's something that's going to be, that's stuff that's going to be coming out in the very near future. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that as well. Again, I want to thank everybody who voted for this on the poll, or just voted for the poll in general. But for the individuals who voted and actually had this subject win, I thought it was kind of a long shot, but here we are, and it ended up winning, which is awesome. So yeah, thanks again for all your great support. It really does mean the world to me. I'm in the process of losing my voice, so I'm going to end the video here by saying that, again, thanks for everything, and until next time, take care.